Good morning, evening, or night, wherever you are. Welcome to WHAM today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Monday, 23rd June, 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. The conflict between Iran and Israel continues to reverberate globally, impacting economies and geopolitical strategies. Iran's parliament has expressed support for potentially blocking the Strait of Hormuz, a vital artery for global oil transport. The final decision now rests with the country's National Security Council. Following strikes on Iranian nuclear sites, Iran's supreme leader has requested increased support from Putin. In response to the strikes, Russia's Putin told the Iranian foreign minister that there was no justification for the U.S. attack. The United States, after strikes on Iranian nuclear sites, President Trump called for a ceasefire between Iran and Israel, though this has not been publicly confirmed by Israel. Trump also emphasized the importance of keeping oil prices down, stating that everyone should keep oil prices lower or they're playing into the hands of the enemy. Analysts suggest that the U.S. engagement in the Israel-Iran conflict could intensify China's drive for critical resources, potentially strengthening its position against Washington. Despite escalating tensions in the Middle East, Chinese business optimism remains strong, according to Bear Huo of FundPop. In India, Chakri Lokapriya of LGT India anticipates the Nifty 50 to reach 27,528,000 by the end of 2025, indicating a 10-12% potential upside. The United States military strikes on nuclear targets in Iran have reverberated across the globe, prompting market fluctuations and diplomatic maneuvering. European nations are actively trying to revive diplomacy aimed at curbing the Israel-Iran war. Russian President Vladimir Putin has characterized the U.S. strikes as pushing the world to a very dangerous line, assuring Iran of his support and deeming the attack unjustified. Adding to global concerns, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, has cautioned that the strikes could potentially disrupt the global economy. Global markets initially appeared to absorb the news of the strikes, with investors keenly observing Iran's next course of action. This event triggered significant volatility in both oil and financial markets, causing crude oil prices to jump to a 5-month high before experiencing subsequent fluctuations. Wall Street initially rallied, fueled by hopes of limited retaliation and a ceasefire between Israel and Iran, but later drifted as investors awaited Iran's reaction. The Dow Jones Industrial Average reflected this initial optimism with a notable rise. Despite the geopolitical unease, Wall Street strategists anticipate the impact of the U.S. strikes on Iran will be challenging for investors, with many tech stocks, including Nvidia, expected to weather the storm. A trend of investors withdrawing billions from the U.S. market has emerged, coinciding with European stock markets outperforming the U.S. for the first time in several years. In Europe, Frankfurt stocks remained largely unperturbed by the U.S. strike on Iran, while Swiss stocks showed sensitivity to the U.S.-Iran tensions and shifts in trade policies. Over in Asia, Seoul shares ended a 5-day rally, and the Korean won reached a 1-month low following the U.S. strike. Meanwhile, Australian shares rebounded on hopes of an Iran-Israel ceasefire, recovering from a previous ASX sell-off triggered by escalating tensions. Hong Kong's fund industry is poised to attract substantial inflows as international investors seek a safe harbor amidst rising geopolitical tensions, according to Financial Secretary Paul Chan Mopo. Back in the United States, shale oil producers are unlikely to increase production, prioritizing hedging over ramping up output despite the situation in Iran. Citi anticipates minimal impact on us, semiconductor equipment makers, from the revocation of Aztec export waivers to China. The U.S. agricultural sector is grappling with a slump in soybean prices due to favorable weather conditions. China's imports of U.S. agricultural products experienced a significant drop in May, potentially permanently, as Beijing diversifies its food supplies due to ongoing trade war concerns. Shifting focus to Australia, Rabobank suggests the nation faces a crucial decision between defense and social spending. Virgin Australia shares rallied by 8.30% following its $685 million, $439 in initial public offering. A superannuation warning has been issued after a $25 billion asset sell-off due to escalating US-Iran tensions. India. The Indian stock market saw a volatile day on June 24, 2025, initially rallying on Israel-Iran ceasefire news before falling due to renewed Middle East tensions and the weaker sector. The Sensex jumped over 900 points, with the Nifty 50 surpassing 25,250. Gift Nifty Trends projected a gap-up start, trading around 25,212 premium.d. Nifty 50 opened at 25,079.9, and Sensex reached 82,534.61. Benchmarks later dropped 1% as investors grew concerned about Middle East tensions following a reported U.S. attack on Iranian nuclear sites. Despite market volatility, HAL shares increased. Indian, its stocks dropped up to 3% after Accenture's Q3 results. Vedanta, Polycab India, and Alcoa Mines Chemicals traded ex-date for dividends, with Vedanta's share price closely watched. L&T listed India's first ESG bonds on the NSE, raising Rs 500 crore. Market experts like Raja Venkatraman, TradeBrains Portal, and MarketSmith India shared their stock picks, while Sachin Gupta of Pfizer suggested buying Angel One and Trent shares, expecting Nifty 50 to hold above 24,800. India is becoming a key global growth driver amid a G7 slowdown. Bloomberg reported that India and the U.S. aim for a trade deal by July, despite obstacles, and noted a weak dollar could boost foreign fund inflows. Global trading giants are expanding in India, leading to talent rushes and exchange upgrades. Adani commissioned India's first off-grid green hydrogen pilot plant. The Prosus CEO told CNBC that India is expected to create a $100 billion tech company soon. Firm P, backed by Walmart, is preparing for a $1.50 billion in India. According to Bloomberg News, the country will launch its first nationwide household income survey in 2026 to analyze economic shifts. The Vivo X200 Fe with MediaTek 9300 may soon be available in India. Israel-Iran conflict. The initial announcement of a ceasefire between Israel and Iran on June 24, 2025, briefly boosted the Indian stock market. However, renewed geopolitical tensions in the Middle East, including a U.S. attack on Iranian nuclear sites, later contributed to market declines. United States. The United States and India are targeting a trade agreement by July, despite existing challenges. A U.S. senator is advocating for targeting businesses with Moscow, which puts India-Russia relations in the spotlight. Reports of a U.S. attack on Iranian nuclear sites affected the Indian market negatively. China is strategically leveraging its rare earth element dominance over the U.S., Europe, and India, influencing crucial industries. China urges de-escalation between Israel and Iran, warning that a Strait of Hormuz blockade could trigger a global energy crisis, mandating daily check-ins for Chinese ships there due to heightened risks. While China's UN ambassador criticized the U.S. strike on Iran, Beijing's support for Tehran remains ambiguous. Domestically, China's IP industry is booming, fueled by popular series and reimagined mythologies. Baidu's Apollo Go has launched commercial autonomous vehicle service. DeepSeek, a Chinese tech firm, is reportedly aiding China's military while circumventing export controls. While Chongqing is expanding its trade routes for EVs and components to Europe, Russia, and Southeast Asia. Goldman Sachs has proposed the Prom 10, a list of China's top stocks. Iran's parliament has approved a measure to potentially close the Strait of Hormuz in response to military strikes by the United States, raising global concerns. The United States military strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities have escalated tensions, potentially leading to a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Tesla is launching its robotaxi service in Austin, Texas, following the announcement of a ceasefire agreement brokered by President Trump between Israel and Iran. Global markets have responded positively. The Nifty Oil and Gas Index saw gains of over 1%, and crude oil prices on the MEX dipped below Yoga 6,000. Analysts predict the Nifty 50 could exceed 25,200. High-tech pipes and NDC, URB Infrastructure, and NFL are being recommended as promising stocks. Across the Asia-Pacific region, market indices have also risen, with the Kospi opening 2% higher and Nikkei futures showing gains. The evolving situation is projected to have an impact on stock market trends, including IPOs and foreign institutional investor activity. Meanwhile, the United States State Department has issued a warning concerning potential demonstrations aimed at Americans abroad, a consequence of U.S. involvement in the Israel-Iran conflict. Across Eastern Europe, Ukraine is bracing for increased losses in its conflict with Russia, exacerbated by the distractions and shifts in global attention resulting from the tensions between Israel and Iran. Russia's complex relationship with Iran is shaped by strategic interests and the war in Ukraine. Despite Iranian support in Ukraine, Russia's ability to significantly aid Iran, especially after attacks on its nuclear sites, is constrained. Putin has pledged to assist the Iranian people, raising concerns about possible Russian involvement in the Iran-Israel conflict. Russia denounced strikes on Iran, with the Kremlin deeply regretting the action and warning that it opened a Pandora's box, potentially escalating the risk of a nuclear disaster. Domestically, Putin is seeking investment from the global south amid recession fears, while simultaneously asserting Russia's economic resilience. Russian investigators have concluded the Crocus terror probe, asserting the attack served Ukraine's interests. Furthermore, Russia continues its military operations in Ukraine, launching a major assault on Kyiv. In other developments, Mali and Russia have signed a nuclear energy agreement during Guaita's visit to Moscow. The United States has conducted strikes on Iran, drawing condemnation from Russia, which described the action as opening a Pandora's box with potentially dire consequences. Following attacks on Iranian nuclear sites, Iran faces heightened concerns about nuclear proliferation, with speculation that certain nations might supply it with nuclear warheads. Despite Iran's support for Russia in the Ukraine conflict, Russia's capacity to provide substantial aid to Iran after these attacks is limited due to its own strategic considerations and constraints. Putin has stated Russia is making efforts to assist the Iranian people. Saudi Arabia's non-oil industrial production has seen a notable rise, increasing by 5.3% in 2024, as reported by Gastat. To attract further investment, the second phase of industrial incentives was launched, targeting high-value projects. The Public Investment Fund, PIF, has also introduced its first commercial paper program to improve funding flexibility. The perfume market is expected to reach USD 2.7 billion by 2033, growing at a CAGR of 3.9%. The bottled water market is projected to reach USD 5.4 billion by 2033, with a CAGR of 8.1%. A Cisco holding unit will invest $426 million to upgrade 4 ports. Saudi Sport Clubs is planning an IPO that could raise up to $69. Crude oil production has risen to 9 million barrels per day. Chinese investors are showing increased interest in the Saudi market, according to Ceasefire. Saudi Cargo is expanding its operations in China and Asia, including Hong Kong, to support Saudi Vision 2030, focusing on e-commerce, agriculture, and technology. CEO Loy stated the Far East is a critical trade market. European stock markets are experiencing turbulence as Middle East tensions intensify. Initial market dips stemmed from Iran's recent attacks, compounded by US strikes in the region. These US strikes notably impacted defense stocks, which experienced declines. However, expectations of a potential ceasefire between Iran and Israel are fueling anticipation of market recovery. Deutsche Bank CEO described the market conditions as calm, despite the prevailing downward trend. Amidst this volatility, American Honda Finance intends to issue benchmark bonds in the European market. South Korea's trade representative is engaging in preliminary talks with the United States, focusing on securing tariff reductions. The nation is carefully monitoring economic and financial consequences stemming from recent international developments. President Lee has described the situation in the Middle East as very urgent. The financial industry is on high alert because of market instability after US strikes in Iran, with South Korean shares falling from a 3.5-year peak. Regarding economic policy, South Korea is considering carbon futures amidst growing examination of its liquefied natural gas (LN) port. A notable rise in consumer sentiment may postpone expected interest rate reductions. The digital finance landscape is also developing, with South Korea entering the global stablecoin arena. Mirai Asset has introduced the first exchange-traded fund ETF in the nation that monitors total world stock. Technological progress continues to reshape the South Korean market. Tesla's recent robotaxi service launch in Texas is anticipated to intensify competition within South Korea. Moreover, Korea Blockchain Week 2025 has announced Donald Trump Jr. as a keynote speaker, with Sue Stable and Xerog confirmed as conference partners. Myanmar's instability allows China to maintain its grip on the rare earth elements market. Raw materials are quietly sourced from Myanmar. China relies on these materials for its dominance. Turning to Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau faced criticism over his handling of foreign interference allegations. Opposition parties demanded a public inquiry. The allegations center on China's alleged attempts to influence Canadian elections. Trudeau defended his government's actions, stating they took the matter seriously. In the latest from France, nationwide protests erupted over pension reforms. President Emmanuel Macron's plan to raise the retirement age sparked widespread anger. Unions organized strikes and demonstrations across the country. The reforms are seen as necessary to ensure the long-term viability of the pension system. Meanwhile, in Germany, the government is grappling with rising inflation. The energy crisis, exacerbated by the war in Ukraine, has driven up prices. The Bundesbank is considering further interest rate hikes. Chancellor Olaf Scholz is under pressure to provide more relief to struggling households. Japan's recent 20-year bond auction revealed diminished demand, with ratios dipping below the 12-month average. Simultaneously, Akazawa signaled continued efforts to set a date for upcoming trade negotiations. The nation also denied reports that the U.S. was pressing for defense expenditures equal to 3.5% of Japan's GDP. The Nikkei stock average experienced an initial surge after Trump announced a ceasefire between Iran and Israel, yet it subsequently decreased due to persistent concerns about Iran, though a weaker yen provided some buffer. A Japanese tariff negotiator is scheduled to make a 7th trip to the U.S. to further trade discussions. Amidst global uncertainties, Asian markets experienced a turbulent period. Initially, optimism from Wall Street gains spurred early market activity. However, broader economic concerns and geopolitical tensions tempered this enthusiasm. Investor anxiety regarding the situation in Iran precipitated a decline in Asian stocks, coupled with increased oil prices. A brief rally followed ceasefire announcements between Israel and Iran, boosted by statements from Donald Trump. This proved fleeting, as escalating conflict between Iran and Israel quickly induced risk aversion, leading to dips in both stocks and currencies. Further declines in Asian shares were noted after reported as strikes on Iranian nuclear sites, which also triggered a surge in oil prices, painting a complex picture of market instability. Canada's financial sector experienced several significant developments. The S&P T6 Composite closed higher, up 0.42%. The ETF market saw considerable activity, including movements in the crypto space, the launch of leveraged products, and regulatory reviews. Specifically, an XRP ETF made its debut and achieved a historic milestone within 72 hours. The online trading platform Plus 500 also received approval to enter Canada's over-the-counter market. Trade relations remain in focus due to ongoing discussions surrounding tariffs, including those imposed by the Trump administration. Shifting focus to France, political tensions are escalating ahead of upcoming elections. President Emmanuel Macron's centrist coalition faces a strong challenge from Marine Le Pen's National Rally Party. Recent polls indicate a tight race, raising concerns about potential policy shifts regarding immigration and the European Union. The French economy is also under scrutiny, with debates focusing on fiscal policy and government spending. Public demonstrations and strikes have been ongoing, reflecting widespread discontent over pension reforms and the rising cost of living. Across the Atlantic, in Brazil, environmental policies are under review amid concerns about deforestation in the Amazon rainforest. President Lula da Silva has pledged to strengthen environmental protection measures and combat illegal mining. However, challenges remain in enforcing these policies due to limited resources and political opposition. Brazil's agricultural sector is also facing scrutiny due to its impact on deforestation. International pressure is mounting for Brazil to demonstrate tangible progress in protecting the Amazon. Meanwhile, China is navigating a complex economic landscape. Recent data indicates a slowdown in economic growth, prompting the government to consider new stimulus measures. Trade relations with the United States remain strained, with ongoing disputes over tariffs and technology. China's military activities in the South China Sea continue to raise regional tensions. The government is also tightening its control over the tech sector, implementing new regulations on data privacy and cybersecurity. In the latest from Germany, discussions continue regarding energy security and the transition to renewable energy sources. The government is facing pressure to reduce its reliance on fossil fuels and accelerate the development of renewable energy infrastructure. Germany's industrial sector is also grappling with rising energy costs and supply chain disruptions. The debate over nuclear power remains contentious, with some advocating for extending the lifespan of existing nuclear plants. United Kingdom is actively pursuing carbon removal technologies. They are viewing it as a major avenue for future industrial expansion. Recent economic data showed that the UK's economy rebounded strongly in June, according to Purchasing Managers Index figures. Regarding corporate leadership, UK retailers have boosted the number of women on their boards. Female representation is now almost 50%. Dutch early. On the international stage, the UK has appealed to Iran to restart talks. They are encouraging Iran to take advantage of a chance for fresh discussions. Turning to the ongoing conflict, live updates continue to track developments in Ukraine and Russia, focusing on the impact of Moscow's war efforts. A drone attack targeted Kyiv. 5 people were reportedly injured as a result of the assault. South Africa's Takealot is seeing revenue gains amid competition with Amazon. The World Bank has loaned South Africa USD 1.5 billion for infrastructure improvements and a shift to green energy. The South African rand recently fell to a 1-month low after strikes in Iran. In other news, 2 brothers in South Africa inherited R6.8 billion from a pharmaceutical business. The perceived exceptionalism of the United States is reshaping global capital flows, a central theme discussed at a Singapore roundtable moderate by CNBC's Martin Salm with stock exchange leaders. Switzerland is being sought after by Baja California for technological collaborations aiming to enhance the region's capabilities. Tourist spending within Switzerland has seen a notable increase throughout 2024, boosting the nation's economy. As a prominent destination for asylum seekers, Switzerland tracks and publishes key statistics related to asylum applications. However, Switzerland has voiced significant concern over the escalating violence and instability in the Middle East. In local news, a bear attacked and killed a sheep in the southeastern part of Switzerland, highlighting ongoing wildlife management challenges. Germany is significantly increasing its defense budget, aiming for 3.5% of GDP by 2029. Simultaneously, German markets showed concern over escalating Middle East tensions. The German medical technology company Brainlab has announced its IPO price range as €8,100 per share. Meanwhile, in the United States, manufacturers are struggling to fill nearly 400,000 job openings, highlighting a growing labor shortage. Turning to Thailand, authorities are working to address the issue of Cambodian scam centers, compounded by ongoing border disputes. Economically, Nexon Thai has launched its flagship store in Thailand, signaling expansion plans in Southeast Asia. Oman, in a move to diversify its economy, plans to introduce a personal income tax, reducing reliance on hydrocarbon revenues. In South Korea, the Bank of Korea has committed to swift market stabilization measures in response to the escalating crisis in the Middle East. Shifting focus to Somalia, analysts are optimistic about the potential of the country's nascent securities market. Finally, Brazil is increasingly becoming a destination of choice for Cuban migrants. And that's a wrap for today's news. Pavilion headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.